the dance that kills. During July of 1518, in a small town in France, a single woman started dancing. It was infectious and got other people dancing. Most people were having a great time until someone realized they couldn't stop. After the entirety of the crowd realized no one could stop, they were dancing with tears. Day after day, more people would join and never stop. Not to eat, not to sleep, not even to relieve themselves. In turn, killing themselves from exhaustion. At the peak of the dance plague, 400 people were dancing in the town center, and 15 people were dying daily of exhaustion, only stopping after their death. The whole thing only ended after everyone was gathered up and strapped down in a hospital. It was subsequently blamed on the devil, and while unbelievable at first, modern theories suggest this plague was possible by accidentally eating ergot fungi, which grew in their rye bread. Ergot being similar to lysergic acid diethylamide, more commonly known as LSD-25. And if you don't believe that to be enough, the other theory is mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria, due to things like death, disease, starvation, and negative superstitions being daily occurrences. 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. 100 years ago, the movie The Kid was released, featuring Silas Hathaway. Yesterday, he turned 102 years old and is one of 4 living actors to play in the silent film era. Number 4. In the polar oceans, especially salty and cold water, shoot down from the ice due to its density, where it freezes everything in its path, creating a sort of starfish doomsday. Number 3. The 18 and 1900 New York's insane asylum were known for their effective beds, known as the crib. These used to be places of pain and torture, instead of a place of rehabilitation and safety, because if you weren't insane before living in a caged bed, you would definitely be insane after. Number 2. 20% of people have a genetic mutation that provides resilience to the cold, lacking the alpha-actinin 3 found in fast-twitch fibers, keeping them feeling warmer in harsh weather. Weirdly, people with this mutation are exceptional at sports, so if you ever get crossed up, just blame it on not being mutated. And number 1. Pandas have a tough time mating as it is. They also bond to parent figures, so to prevent that, Chinese panda keepers dress up to prevent the panda from knowing their people. To be honest though, I think this little guy knows what's going on. We live in a big world, but some organisms live in a small world, a micro-small world, like this weevil. We see him from this average angle all the time, but getting up close and personal with him, he looks like this. He kinda looks like a flaky juggernaut, but I do think he looks a lot better than ants. They're a vibe from our view. They're cool, they're just ants. But to other bugs, I wonder if they're uglier than the average bug. Also, here's the ant's opposite orifice. Wait, am I allowed to show that? Moving on, another thing I find fascinating about the micro world is how our needles mimic the needles of nature. We use these shots to keep people healthy and alive, while vipers use these for killing and murder. Next to the viper fang, we can see the spider fang, and next to that, a scorpion stinger. And for man-made micro images, we have oil bubbles. It's actually been my phone wallpaper for a few months, but I never knew where it came from. The $100 euro, Velcro, human skin, that's mildly disturbing. And lastly, this computer. It looks like what? Looks like nothing. But next to a grain of rice, you're able to realize, whoa, that's a pretty big piece of rice. Time out. Commercial break. Only 7% of you guys are subscribed. Help me change that. 92.4 of you guys subscribe right now while you're watching the video. That way you never miss one of these. Also, feel free to join the Discord down below. Alright, commercial break over. The Bjrk stalker. Ricardo Lopez was your average exterminator until 1993, when he started to develop an obsession with the popular Icelandic singer, Bjrk, who spent 5 weeks at the top 100. Every popular figure has their stalkers. But what makes Ricardo special is he bought a camera to record and document every moment up until his big plan was executed, which was killing her by mailing her a chemical bomb laced with sulfuric acid. He was actually quite proud to have access to such harmful chemicals. For being an exterminator, he felt he had to kill her because her new boyfriend was black, though he used a tad bit harsher language about him. He was quite apparently mentally ill, and his parents worried that he may snap like this, but he was sure to keep everything under wraps. He wrote over 800 pages in a diary, explaining how he was a loser, and about his obsession for Bjrk, but for some reason, I watched every moment of every tape. And the last tape was the one where he sent off his murder device. He gets extremely nervous, gets a gun, paints his walls, shaves his head, paints his head, and then uses the gun on himself. The police ended up finding his body and watched his tapes, and while sickened by them, they were able to intercept the package before any physical harm was done to Bjrk.
I'm not gonna try to pretend I'm smart or savvy or cool. I gotta pass, even though I want to. I gotta pass that. I gotta be honest. And that ain't easy, man. That ain't easy. Okay. You are a camera. I am Ricardo. We are both the same now. You are a living part of my brain, which is simultaneously, perhaps doing a better job of it, remembering these events which are going to unfold. I might as well begin.
Top 3 close calls with death. Number 3. A random granny has her go at a chainsaw, but after completing the cut, the tree swings back. Luckily, she was extremely unaware that this almost turned into one of those accidental decapitation videos you find on sketchy sites. Number 2. A woman crossing a road in an odd manner trips at the worst time, directly in front of a bus's path. Luckily, the bus driver swerves out of the way of where her head would have been, leaving her on the ground like a popped cherry tomato. I'm not sure if she has low iron or something, but this isn't really a good state to try and cross the road in. And number 1. While skydiving in midair, this first-time jumper has the most unlucky thing happen, just sort of spontaneous death. Out of seemingly nowhere, he starts to have a seizure 12,000 feet in the air, while plummeting to the earth at 120 miles per hour. Obviously, something wasn't right about this. The instructor grabs onto him and activates the parachute himself. Before this incident, his doctor had a sign off saying he was okay, and he hadn't actually had a seizure 6 years prior to this jump. But either way, I don't think he'll be jumping out of any plane soon, or ever for that matter. Why is Gen Z so soft, depressed? Cancel Eminem. It's become a trend to hate on the young people of today, mostly by older people. And the older they are, the more hate they seem to spew. But if Gen Z is the most resourceful, most responsible, most mature, and most well-educated generation, then why are past generations so adamant that this is the worst one yet? Juvenoia. The fear or hostility directed by an older generation towards a younger one, or toward youth culture in general. Boomers use Facebook, millennials use Instagram, and Gen Z uses TikTok. The worst words to them are synonyms for sex and body parts, and the worst words to us are slurs, which only strengthen the divide. Every generation believes the best time to be a kid was when they were a kid, back in the good old days before the new stuff started to hypnotize the kids. But the new generation of today is passionately in love with pleasure and violent games, said Roman Roland in the 1910s. If it sounds familiar, that's because that's what's thought of Gen Z as well. If you're any of these, it's time to realize that Gen Z is no worse than the past generations. And if you're either of these, it's time to stop the hate spewed to the youth before it even has a chance to occur. 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. Snake venom has evolved to be effective in many different ways. Among the most effective is a Russell's viper that hypercoagulates blood. So when you get bit by one of these guys, this is what your veins look like. Number 4. This is the Indiana Bell building. In 1930, it needed to be moved to create a bigger headquarters for Bell. So over the course of a month, it was moved 15 inches every hour until it was rotated. Meanwhile, over 600 employees continued to work inside, stating they didn't feel any movement. Buildings are still moved today, but not with people in them because that's extremely dangerous. Number 3. This is what's known as barrier aggression, or barrier frustration. With something in between two dogs, it can make even the friendliest of dogs display extremely aggressive behavior. Though it seems that they're mad at each other, they're actually mad that they can't communicate correctly. Number 2. This is what a single sperm being selected to fertilize an egg looks like. Usually they help people with low sperm or egg quality. The cool thing about this is, one day, this person will be able to watch their conception, something that would be extremely awkward for the rest of us. And number 1. If seen enemies feel threatened or unhappy in their location, they can quite literally just get up and leave.
I was just looking for the sports channel, Gary.
That's suspicious.
Understanding disabilities. Part 2. Number 3. Exploding head syndrome. Despite sounding like the most disturbing and gruesome ailment, it's surprisingly painless and categorized as a type of parasomnia. During one of these episodes, usually many times in a single night, you're suddenly awoken by the sound of a violent explosion. It can sometimes be paired with seeing a flash of light and usually comes with a heightened level of distress and fear. Number 2. Apotemnophilia, also known as body integrity identity disorder. This condition can cause an otherwise healthy person to have the near uncontrollable urge to amputate parts of their limbs or disable themselves in other ways. It's important to realize that this disorder requires cognitive behavioral therapy and is usually SSRI treated, and not just common thoughts. It's said to have similarities between obsessive compulsive disorder and body dysmorphic disorder. And number 1, the deadliest psychiatric disorder, anorexia, an intense fear of gaining weight and a distorted perception of one's body. People with anorexia, while usually average everywhere else, have a reoccurring delusion that they need to lose weight. They're under the impression that their thought is correct. But remember, if you're not a psychiatrist, psychologist, physician, therapist, please do not try to diagnose the people in your life. If you have serious concerns, the best thing you can do is be honest, be caring, remove the stigma, and encourage them to seek professional help. The mysterious nature of the Icca stones. In the 1960s, Basilia Asucha stumbled upon an abandoned cave in the region of Icca, Peru, and found the first of many mysterious stones made from andesite, with interesting markings. Basilio and a few of his friends would sell these stones to tourists, stating they were ancient relics of the distant past. One of these stones ended up in the hands of Dr. Javier Cabrera, one with the fish, and not just any fish, an extinct one. So enamored by the history of this stone, he asked Basilio to take him to the cave, where they found over 100,000 of these Icca stones, which they left undisturbed. But Javier continued to buy over 10,000 of these stones over the next few years. These stones surprisingly showed humans living beside dinosaurs, completing brain transplants, using telescopes, and even contacting UFOs. These stones were thought to be authentic, and would change the history of humanity, and flip the knowledge in the timeline of humans like no other. Sadly, these were not ancient relics, but were carved into the stones in the 60s, showing the barbaric depictions of what people thought dinosaurs looked like back then. Actually, none of these animals depicted in these stones had ever existed in South America where they were found. In an effort to examine their authenticity, Javier and Basilio refused to show the location of the most likely non-existent cave. Later, Basilio caved and admitted carving fake stones was easier than working in the fields, leaving the most amazing piece of human history a hoax. Top 5 rare photos from history. Number 5. This is Annette Kellerman, posing in protest for the right for women to wear fitted bathing suits in 1907. She was later arrested for indecency on Revere Beach in Massachusetts for this very bathing suit. Number 4. World War I vet and father to Anne Frank during his service as a lieutenant in 1914. Number 3. This is believed to be the oldest photo taken in Colombia. It shows Bogota, the country's capital, as it stood in 1842. Number 2. And only a couple decades later, in 1864, the second Japanese embassy trip launched to Europe and made a pit stop at the Great Sphinx, giving us this Samurai by the Sphinx photo. Pretty cool to see cultures cross like this. And number 1. On November 30th, 1954, 34-year-old Anne Hodges was sleeping on her couch when a meteorite came crashing through her roof, bounced off her radio, and struck her in the side, leaving her the only documented case of a human being being hit with a meteorite. It sold for $7,500 at an auction. Calculating for inflation, it would have cost $73,000 today. There's only one confirmed death due to a meteorite. It happened in 1972 in Venezuela. It struck a cow and killed it. Top 5 words you've been mispronouncing. Number 5. Have you ever craved some sherbet ice cream? No, you haven't. Because that's not a thing. You've craved sherbet ice cream. I'm not gonna lie, I've always said sherbet. It sounds tasty, and sherbet sounds like it tastes like a leather wallet. Number 4. The most common drug addiction is caffeine, and a lot of people enjoy a good espresso in the morning. Except, no they don't. It's spelled how it's said.
Espresso.
With no X in sight. Number 3. We all know our months.
January, February.
Wrong. We're 2 months in and you already forgot a letter. It's February, not February. I can't blame you. This is literally a kid song, and we've been taught wrong all our life. At least you're not ignorant on your own accord. Number 2. GIF. The creator said it's pronounced GIF, but who really cares what he thinks? Even our dictionary said it's pronounced GIF.
GIF.
And number 1. Of course our For You page has been manipulated to fit our niche. Except, no it hasn't. It fits our niche. Niche. Yeah, I'm not gonna be saying that because that sounds weird. But now that you know people say these wrong, go out into the world and be a pompous jerk to your friends. Bugs. To most people, they're creepy. But luckily, we have humans just as creepy, also known as entomologists, who dedicate their entire lives to look at gross little creatures, like the parasitic wasp, who inject their eggs into baby caterpillars, which ends up turning the poor baby caterpillar into a zombie that protects the wasp babies until they burst from its body. But even wasps get parasites, like this one living with the Stepsistera, where it waits for a male to mate, and lays its eggs inside of the abdomen of the wasp, which then explode out of the abdomen, killing the wasp. Most bug stuff is creepy, but I have to admit, some is cool, like the golden tortoise beetle. They sound magical, and they look like an old ancient myth. And speaking of ancient, the oldest living spider was born in 1974, and lived for 43 years. And of course, it came from Australia. But the oldest bug in general can get up to 60 years old, and it's the African mound building termite. And for the shortest lifespan, that goes to the mayfly females, who usually live less than 5 minutes, which is the shortest lifespan of any living thing on Earth. So, at least they're first in death. Mind-blowing facts with Jearrod. Some animals are born into obligate siblicide, which is making multiple offsprings with the intention of only taking care of the healthiest, while killing off the least healthy babies. Meth labs tend to produce a toxic gas called phosphine, which is actually an insecticide, so roaches stay as about as far away from meth labs as your model citizen. Human brains are a lot more powerful than people realize. If you believe strongly enough that something is real, your body will react accordingly, like voodoo death syndrome. If you believe strongly enough that you've been cursed, your brain can just shut itself off, literally thinking itself to death. Or chronostasis, when your brain stretches your perception of time backwards, like when you look at a clock, and the second hand seems to freeze for a moment. That's actually your brain creating a false memory. And lastly, we're on the cuff of some amazing AI technology, and the Turing test is a test that can tell if the AI has developed intelligent behavior comparable to humans. But that's not the weird part, because being able to pass this test means the AI is also smart enough to pretend to fail it, soaking up knowledge in the background, planning, well, whatever it wants, honestly. Top 3 close calls with death. Number 3. Everyone has those zone out moments where you get into something on your phone and all your senses around you seem to blur. But if this guy didn't get out of his and look up at this moment, he would have likely spent his last moments alive, pinned between this car and this building. So here's a timely reminder to be aware of your surroundings. Number 2. At the edge of a base camp, a giant boulder came tumbling down the side of a mountain, coming within inches of a camper. This guy's instincts are crazy. As many people like to imagine how they would react in certain life-threatening scenarios, this guy went ultra instinct to not be squished like a bug. Number 1. And not for the faint of heart. A family of 3 are on a moped. When a car sideswipes them to get past, the mother and daughter fall off and start sliding directly towards the path of a semi. Through quick thinking and a little maternal instinct, the woman grabs her daughter before her head was ran over by a semi-wheel, and still has the impressive cognizance to roll over, in turn saving her and her daughter's legs from being 18-wheel amputated. I don't think I'll ever ride a moped down the highway. Not after this. Don't forget to tune in next time. We wouldn't want you to miss out on any mysterious content, now would we?